this is Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on the world of property supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. And we're live every week on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn and the website propertymatterstv.co.uk. If you're watching on our website, leave us a Google review, and if you're watching on the socials, get involved in the conversation in the comments section below. Our email address for any topics you want us to discuss is hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. A podcast version is available of the show if you're on the move every Monday at 10 a.m. Just search Property Matters TV wherever you get your podcasts from. So let's take a look at a rather budget-focused Property Matters with our property expert, Joe Joshi. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Paul. Good morning. Good morning to all our viewers, listeners, wherever you are. And budget. Well, let's see what Paul's got in store for me. It can't be any worse than what they actually threw out, but let's see.
Well, it just seems to have been nothing else on the TV for the last month, and certainly unprecedented coverage and analysis since. And I suppose it's probably no surprise why, really, with ongoing cost of living pressures. They've likely contributed a large amount to the coverage and the speculation that there's been out there ahead of the budget. But then if you look at the bigger picture, mortgage rates remain high. Rightmove said a recent study shows that the average first-time buyer mortgage payment is £350 higher than 5 years ago. Household energy bills, while down from their 2022 peak, rose by 10% this month under the latest energy price cap. So Rightmove recently surveyed over 34,000 people to find out what they wanted to see from the new government. The overwhelming majority of renters, 60%, said they wanted to see more support for first-time buyers while simplifying the home buying process. That was the most important thing for them. Excuse me. Against the background, Chancellor Rachel Reeves then, of course, delivered her first budget, the first Labour budget in 14 years. So what changes were announced? Well, housing announcements included £5 billion government investment to deliver Labour's housing plan, with a £500 million boost to the Affordable Homes programme. Investment is planned for sites across the country, such as Liverpool Central Docks, with 2,000 new homes and a transformation of the waterfront. There will also be £25 million to put towards delivery of 3,000 energy-efficient new homes across the country, with a target of 100% of these being affordable. Capital gains tax on residential property remains unchanged. The government also pledged to engage with the industry on plans to make the mortgage guarantee scheme permanently available to support lending at 95% loan to value. And with stamp duty, of course, there was no mention in the budget this last week of the extension of the current stamp duty relief for first-time buyers, which is due to end on March 2025. So that's the big elephant in the room, which we'll come to in a minute. Stamp duty surcharge for those buying a second home, such as landlords buying properties to rent, rose by 2% the following day, increasing from 3 to 5%. And I have to say that was the standout thing for me. So in all the property groups that I follow on social media, they were trying to work out when exactly would it go from 3 to 5%, Joe? Was it going to be exchange or would it be on completion on the 31st of October? They seem to be absolutely obsessed with it. But that's basically the main headlines from a property perspective. Obviously, there was much more in there about NI and all the rest of that, and we'll come to that later. But what's your overall overarching view, Joe, on what we saw on the budget on Wednesday?
Well, quite a mixed bag there. And I think what's happened is we haven't heard all of it, because I think it was quite a lot to throw at the electorate from the Labour camp this time. So things like capital gains has been mooted around for the last 2-3 months now, ever since they've been in, and I think that's probably been a bit of a red herring for this time. It's just to take the focus off some of the other things that they've actually now announced and done, especially the amount of money they're borrowing and the fact that they want to change the planning laws or instigate some speed in the planning laws will actually then bring some of these other areas back in perhaps the autumn budget. And there are other things that will probably be rekindled or revamped in the autumn budget. So there are things that they've kind of just kept back, in my opinion. on the basis that if they threw all of that out, it would have caused a car crash. I mean, it's caused a car crash in other aspects of the financial and the physical things. You can see what the stock market's been doing. You can see all sorts of things that the comparison to Liz Truss's crash have been made, etc., etc. And so they've made quite a lot of people unhappy. I think the easiest way to describe it as would be the Lord giveth with one hand and take it with the other, and that's exactly what they've done. They've tried to sort of give everybody what they think they want, and then actually taking it away with the taxation policies that they feel that they're going to do. But they have underestimated some things, in my humble opinion, and those things are that they have suggested that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to get employed because of all the work they're going to create, and then they're going to get lots of receipts from national insurance and other taxes that are going to come in, and I think they are going to be amazingly shocked that the number of companies that are already started to talk about shedding the staff instead of hiring more staff. And I don't think that as much money as they think they predict is going to come in is going to come anywhere near. So they will go out with a begging bowl again to borrow more. And I think that's the real problem that we're going to face as time goes on. In terms of the property side, which is where we are, which is what we do, we talk property wise. I think the stamp duty that goes up from 3 to 5% on second purchases was instigated immediately the next day on any new transactions that start that day. I think the transactions that were in the system already will or had exchanged will not really be liable for it on their completion, because that will be unfair for people to start to find another £7,000-10,000
Yeah,
towards the
it
completion.
was the key was exchange. Yeah.
I think that's the stamp duty aspect. The other part of the stamp duty is, and there was a mixed message on that, which they didn't make clear, as you rightly said, Paul, that in your opening remarks there, and that is that the stamp duty by the previous government was set till March next year, 2025, on first purchases and first time buyers. It was raised from 125,000 to 250,000 pounds. And then the threshold was raised, I think from memory, was about 400 or 500,000 pounds, which is now going to drop back in March next year. But I think that they've kept that on purpose that way. I think if I had the crystal ball, I would say to you that they will probably say they will sustain that going forward, depending on the actions of what's happened between now and March next year, in terms of there. So they've got that sort of yardstick to go back and say, we're going to sustain the stamp duty for the first time buyers to help them get on the ladder, et cetera, et cetera. So they didn't use that this time, but I think they will keep that as time goes on. Generally, I think people have been hoping and praying that interest rates will come down. That I've always stated that I don't think that they will come down, and I think I probably am going to be proven right. I can't imagine, with the current reaction that the media has had, that the Bank of England next week are going to say, actually, you know what, it's a fantastic budget and we're going to bring down a 0.25% and then another one before Christmas. I think you'll find that it will probably stay where it is. And I think that the inflation at 1.7 will over Christmas go over 2%. So those are my little predictions. And so that hasn't really done anything specifically good for the property market, other than that they feel that they're going to throw more money at putting up new houses, more new homes, and of course some change to the planning laws.
Yeah, so the rate at which stamp duty is charged is currently £250,000 for anyone other than first-time buyers. That's going to fall back to 125, which is where it used to be. And that means that you could end up paying £2,500 more in stamp duty land tax on the average property. And then for first-time buyers, it's currently 425 and it's falling back to 300,000. So a first-time buyer property at the average UK price of 370,759 will pay £3,538 in stamp duty from March 2025, compared with nothing now. So that's a nice little nest egg for them. And the other thing, of course, as you mentioned, CGT, capital gains tax. Everyone was thinking that that was going to be something where the landlords or second home buyers were going to be punished. It didn't come through CGT. It came through stamp duty, as you said, and that means, of course, that again on the average asking price for a home, that's another £7,000, which, of course, had you not exchanged, will now cost you another £7,000. So those were the big elephants in the room. So you're suggesting that you think later in the year they might actually say, do you know what, first time buyers, you can keep it at 425. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, absolutely. I think that there is just no way that first-time buyers will. Because look, in the property world, Paul, we know that we need the first-time buyers. Without a first-time buyer, the system just doesn't roll forward. So by changing that back to where it was, it's not going to help first-time buyers. And the whole idea is to help the first-time buyers get on that. I just think that they've saved that. They've just kept it back, and I think they'll come back in the autumn statement and say, you know, or around whenever that goes off, they will say that they've actually, you know, to stimulate the housing market for the spring, you know, in the autumn statement. That's what they're going to. That's my prediction. I might be wrong, but I've not managed to get it wrong so far. So I think that, you know, they will keep that. That's my view, and they should, in all honesty.
Yeah, they think there might be a rush of buyers now to beat the stamp duty rise, of course, particularly those purchasing for the first time, because that makes a big difference to them, either bringing their plans forward to trying to get their deal done before the charges go up. They're saying it currently takes a lengthy 152 days on average to complete a property transaction once a sale is agreed, which would mean agreeing a deal this week would make sure that they complete on time. Well, this is
Well,
an average.
there's no rush outside on the door. I can tell you that now.
Yeah.
There's no sleeping. There's no sleepovers last night and sleeping bags, and thinking that, you know, this is the moment. It's not like shopping in the middle of for Christmas or whatever special deals come on. And I'm fairly certain most agents will actually report the same, that there was nobody outside sleeping to see if they could buy a deal today and complete prior to the stamp duty increase. Sorry, Paul. I just
Yeah, that does seem quite lengthy, 152 days. I mean, I've heard 12 to 14 weeks, but that's not 152 days, is it?
No.
But anyway, we'll see. We'll see. The number of properties affecting by the change in stamp duty threshold varies by region, of course. You can take a look at the percentage of homes currently free from stamp duty for people buying their first home and how that changed over March, after March 2025 on Rightmove's website. Capital gains tax, of course, as we say, unchanged. There were some trends emerging in the house market that ran up to the budget off the back of several anticipated changes. One of these talked about changes was the increase in CGT, which could have seen landlords paying increased tax on any income from rental properties. Earlier this year, Rightmove say they saw a record number of former rental homes for sale as landlords made the decision to sell their properties as a result of rumoured tax change, along with the additional costs for landlords that have grown over the years. However, the budget this week has confirmed that the current rate of capital gains tax on residential property remains unchanged. So what's happening at the moment in the housing market? Well, they're saying that they've seen strong levels of activity in the typically busy autumn season, and lots more people looking to get on with house moves than they saw in the muted market of 2023. Number of sales agreed is up 29% compared to the same time last year, while the number of people sending inquiries into estate agents is up 17%. On top of that, buyers will also find much more choice of homes, with numbers of homes up 12%. Are you seeing the same sort of thing, Joe? Because looking in the market where I've been looking at the moment, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of interest, but there's certainly lots of properties.
So first things first, I must correct that it's not the autumn budget because we've just had the autumn budget. It will be the
Yeah,
spring budget.
yeah,
I think
I
because I
gathered
keep
that.
seeing autumn stuck in my head at the moment, it came out on the basis of, but I believe that those changes will come in the spring budget. So I just want to correct that. In terms of the where we are in the housing market, look, at the end of the day, throughout the last year, since maybe the time that Labour came into power and prior with the cost of living and all the other bits and the interest rates, the letting market and landlords really took their foot off the accelerator about buying and decided that they wanted to dump, get out, get rid of stock that perhaps was not producing, things that were not getting the level of rent that they should get were old, things that perhaps were also below a C rating in EPC. All of those things conjured a situation where landlords were, leaving in droves or coming out. That meant that there was now more stock available for purchasers, and the winners of that stock probably were first-time buyers because they were when landlords buy to let property, the persons that they compete with is the first-time buyer because they're entry properties as per se. So there might be a one bedroom or a two-bedroom flat or a small house or whatever. The ones that they can find a lot of tenants for are the ones that landlords want to buy. Equally, they're the same ones that the first-time buyer wants to buy. So, the first-time buyer has a competitor. The competitor is the landlord who wants to buy and then rent to those who can't actually get that. So there has been a surplus of properties coming back to the market. House prices, in my opinion, have been neutral. Normally I use the automatic gear stick as a yard. So, mostly we're in drive. At the moment, we are parked in neutral. We're not in the reverse. We had a bit of reverse. We had correction last year, but at the moment it's showing that it's a little bit going forward, but it's not driving crazy. So there's stock available. That means we are now in a buyer's market, not a seller's market, because it's about supply and demand. So when we have a lot of demand and lesser supply, of course, house prices tend to go up like any other product would. And so that therefore people start rushing around and paying more money. At the moment, the choices are there. It's a buyer's market. They've got the choice. They've obviously also got to look at what deals are on the market available for mortgage purposes. And the base rate is at 5%, and some companies are offering 3.5, 4.5, up to between 3.5 and 4.5 fixed rate, depending on the time and scale. So there's nothing out there that is setting the world on fire, and so that's why you don't see any activity. And I can honestly say to you that our activity is been muted on the basis that all of those things, and on top of it, that there was a budget coming in for the last 9 weeks. Most people have been focused on what that budget's going to look like and how it's going to be. And well, we've seen the result of that now, and now we've got to sort of work around how that's going to happen. So it's steady as you go, as they say. It's not choppy waters or anything like that, but we shall see what happens in the new year.
I've been hearing that there's quite a bit of activity in the up to 500,000 market, particularly talking about the south here, obviously. But the 500 to 650 market is the one where really things are very quiet.
Yes, because they're second homes fundamentally. So first-time buyers are, going to be up to 350 maybe. Broadly speaking, in the north, you can get a lot more property for your money. So, but then it's the cost. You see, it's easy to say go to the north, but if your work is in the south, you've got to add transportation, other costs, time, etc. And so sometimes people think, well, actually, it's nice to have my property in the north, but I'm always on the train back and forward. So you've got to look at all of that side of things as well. So up to about 350, most people, there's some activity around the UK. And I think that the 500,000-600,000 is your second home, your family home, and their cost of living is probably putting the brakes on that because the irony of moving things and what we do here is we talk about the real life situations, the things that we experience, and I will always talk about things that experience. And I mean, this last couple of weeks we've been trying to change car registration numbers from an insurance company, and it's just mind blowing that it can take nearly a day for them to decide, and secondly, it could cost you nearly £300 just to change a registration number, or it's cheaper to cancel the policy and start again. And when you start thinking about and I was thinking about that during the week, that, every time we want to change something and it's another 200 or £150 to make that change, this is just nonsense. You should be able to go online and change the registration number of your car on your policy, providing everything else is no. It doesn't work like that, and that's the same with things like utilities, your mobile phones, etc., etc. There's so many costs, hidden costs, that are involved in trying to make some changes, and you don't allow for that in your budget. But all of a sudden, you're another 300, 400, £500 that month out on bits that you just don't think were necessary. But if you're going to make those changes and you want to do that, that's what's going to happen. So I think a lot of people take that on board, and so as a family, a lot of families, with the cost of living, have got a break on perhaps their move.
Well, the decision to not raise capital gains tax on residential property is, according to some experts, going to have an immediate impact on the second homes market, as owners are now less inclined to sell their property. This could present new challenges, they say, for house hunters who were hoping for the increase in taxes to trigger a selling frenzy that would have created a larger pool of properties to choose from. As this is now not the case, previous hesitant buyers will be motivated to finally start their property search to avoid missing out. One particular agent, Nick Leeming, said that we welcome the Chancellor's decision to leave capital gains tax on residential property and buy-to-lets unchanged. With supply already tight across the rental market, increasing CGT would have likely discouraged landlords from maintaining or expanding their portfolios, adding further upward pressure to rental prices and impacting affordability for renters. So that's interesting. We were expecting, obviously, with all the additional charges coming on landlords, that there would have been lots of property for first-time buyers, but now that search is going to remain as tough as it's always been.
So the search for first-time buyers at the higher properties is still going to continue, primarily because people have decided not to sell immediately. But my suggestion, Paul, would be that if those people are minded to sell, then this is the time for them to sell so that they don't get caught up with the hike in the inheritance tax with the CGT, because I think that come spring they will bring that back. They will say we now need to borrow more money, or we need more money, because they're going to throw 20 billion at the NHS in a heartbeat. Then they're going to turn around and we need more money, and they've held back the increase of the capital gains tax, but I think they will bring it in. And that's where they'll raise some of the other money that they're going to look for in the spring. So my suggestion would be that if somebody is thinking that they should sell, then sell.
What about the decision to scrap the non-dom tax regime? They're saying that's going to impact foreign investors' decisions to invest in the UK. The absence of tax benefits for non-doms may impact the high-end London market, for example, traditionally very popular with international buyers. So do you think they're going to stay away, Joe? But will that also mean nicer homes for people that live here?
Well, the truth is, most people that live here cannot afford those nicer homes in London. Because that's the way it is. Once you come out of London, it's very hard to go back into London because house prices are so high. The international market won't stay away as a non-dom status. The reason why the international market comes to London are many other reasons other than taxation and being a non-dom scenario. There are many reasons people come and invest in London, and one of the major ones is called security and safety for their family and their children. And in spite of what people might say or think, London is still by far one of the safest places to bring your children up and give education and other things that you want to do. So when they need to do it, they will turn up and do it, and they will buy those properties. But even if they were selling those properties, it isn't going to be sold to the local market in the UK. The UK, the way the system is set up, you step on the first time ladder, you go up to the top, and then either you stay there, and the minute you leave that, it's impossible to go back there because house prices tend to increase for those jewels and the crown type of properties that people want. And so if you've got a big, 30, 40 million pound mansion in Regent's Park or something like that, that will go to an international, once it's sold, it's gone. It'll go back to an international buyer. Very rarely is it going to be someone that's kind of, if anyone here in the UK tends to have the money, to go and buy a property in London, you'll find that they actually go and buy a property somewhere in the sun, so that they can actually go and enjoy. So they're not going to spend 30, 40, 50 million pounds to stay where they are. They're going to go somewhere sunnier. Whereas people tend to come into the country from international waters for other reasons other than taxation. They come here for security, safety, education, and all those other things that actually gives them, because all over the world people travel, and when they travel with an entourage of securities, safety, security guards, etc., and that is something they just don't need to have in the UK.
Just looking at some of the outside influences on the budget, such as, for example, the employers' increase in national insurance contributions. They're rising from 13.8 to 15%. In addition, the threshold at which businesses start paying national insurance on workers' earnings will be lowered from 9,100 to 5,000. Well, of course, one of the big employers in the property industry is the estate agents industry. And one wonders, given that things are not particularly setting the world alight in the world of estate agency at the moment, how agents are going to cope with these additional costs.
Well, they're not. I mean, a lot of agents are now becoming self-employed. Companies don't really want to have the extra burden of the staff. It's not just about the national insurance. It's also about other matters that relate to that. So things like increase in national insurance only sort of puts a nail in the coffin for people wanting to have further jobs within that industry. Automation has become a huge thing in the estate agency business. So your calls are being answered by AI now, and all sorts of other things. It's just the game has changed, or is changing dramatically, so I don't think it's not, nobody's going to be employing more people. If anything, I think you'll find that the number of people that are employed will be urged to go and become consultants and do self-employed and show that they're not earning as much as they probably could be earning. But employers definitely won't be adding more employees, to the best of my knowledge.
Do you think it's going to lead to job losses, or do you think the self-employed model will continue to thrive as a result?
In a state agency, it will thrive, because once you're in that business, it becomes, it's either part of your soul, part of your blood, your DNA, and you're going to carry on doing it, or you were never right for it. You're going to do something different. Generally speaking, I find that a lot of employers are already thinking about shedding one or two people because they can't afford to increase the national insurance contributions. And in other cases, they probably won't employ anymore.
Just talking about planning reform, and there was lots of information which we did at the beginning of the show about all the money to build houses and transform dock areas like Liverpool, for example, which already there's some fantastic transformations happened in that city. I know from first-hand experience, and more to come, which is got to be good news. But looking at planning overall, there was very little detail, in fact, no detail in there really about planning reform, and that's one of the things they really led on prior to the election. just one wonders when we're actually going to hear anything about planning reform. There was no money set aside to review planning and do anything about changing the way it works.
Well, I mean, the money that they put aside was about making sure that there was enough funds to employ planning consultants and planning officers and trying to speed the process. The problem is the process is so archaic that it's not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. So it's a good buzzword, a byword, if you want to call it. We're going to change the planning laws, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. But it's when you come to it, it's far from it. You know, we know that Gove had a damn good go at trying to sort out planning laws and planning things that he wanted to do, and he never got anywhere, in all honesty, because it's not just about the money you throw at it. It is the system and the archaic system that is just it's gonna take, you know, a long time for that to actually change or become automated in some cases, because the way the country is designed, with all of the areas that you've got to consider, not only just the regulations for safety, but the, you know, perhaps it's a an area of natural beauty, or it's got, you know, green belt neighboring, or all sorts of things that come in before they actually get round to giving that planning. That can't change. It's not going to change overnight. There's no way they're going to just turn around and say, actually, you know what? We don't give a monkey whether you sit next to a green belt. We don't care about this area. We're going to plonk 3,000 homes in that bit of green grass tomorrow. It's not going to happen.
Just lastly, talking about right to buy, the government did say that it was going to reduce the discount offered to tenants to buy their council homes under the right to buy scheme. This means that they will have to pay, in some cases, tens of thousands of pounds more to get themselves on the housing ladder. Charities, of course, say, and those involved in that industry say it seems unfair to punish them. But I've never really understood the right to buy scheme, particularly with the levels of discounts that were offered initially. They seemed to be so dramatic, and it almost gave those that were tenants an unfair step up onto the ladder compared to those that were trying to do it the traditional unfunded route.
Yeah. So the right to buy was designed, as you know, by Lady Margaret Thatcher, and sell off all the stock and things that people wanted to do and so forth, which is great. You know, it motivated the market. The problem is that they never ever replenished that stock. They've never been able to get back to provide the homes. The ultimate original reason of having a council property, or to be able to rent a property from the council, your local council, was that it was affordable. For those that couldn't afford to buy at the time and couldn't afford to rent at a higher level, private sector level, they had the chance to rent from the council. That's why it was there. Then they came along with this idea of giving masses of discounts to people that originally couldn't afford to rent those properties, but they now were in it. So they thought, well, you know, they've been good people. They've been paying their rent, which they've got through perhaps some form of benefit in the first place because they weren't able to get a job. So the money's just gone round. It comes from one end of the department and then pays the other end of the department, and someone has a place to live. But then some smart aleck came along and said, I'll tell you what we do. We'll give them loads of deposits and reduce the house prices that they can have. And funny enough, amazingly, they found the facilities to find the mortgages to buy those properties. It is an unfair situation for other first-time buyers. I agree with you there, because all of a sudden, somebody who's been renting a property now can afford to buy a property because they've got a massive discount. What they should do is probably offer a lump sum deposit for them to vacate the council property and go and buy themselves another property, so that somebody else who isn't been able to afford to live or rent an ordinary property can be replaced into that council property. You know, they give them a little Brucey bonus, if you like, and say it's 50 grand, and off you go, instead of saying, well, there's £150,000 further reduction on a property that you're sitting on, and we'll sell it to you because you've been a good tenant. And by the way, you've been a good tenant because we've actually given you the benefits you've had the benefits through other systems, be it whatever that, say, unemployment, etc., and then it goes back round to paying you a rent for a property that we've actually given you in the first place. So I think the nicest thing they could do is probably say, we'll offer you a amount that gives you, whether it's 10 or 5 or 15% towards your property. And if you feel you can go and now afford a mortgage, there's your deposit. Give us our property back so we can actually give that to somebody who's more needy right now. And there are lots of people that are, homeless right now. And some of those families are put in hotel rooms when perhaps there's one person living in a 3-bedroom house, because that's what's happened. They used to have it as a family home. The family's all gone. And now there's one person living in that one particular property, which really could be recycled to another new family. The
So
system is
overall,
definitely broke.
sorry. So overall, the budget view is that there could be, well, generally what I'm paraphrasing from what I've seen as industry action, they should say they're thinking there could be a bit of a cooling in the buy-to-let sector with more landlords exiting or reconsidering new purchases. So that isn't going to change. That's going to continue as it's done for at least the last 12, 18 months. But overall, they say the budget isn't as dramatic as feared from a property perspective. So they're saying, well, there are things that are still going to go on, but it's not as bad as it could have been. Do you agree? To sum
I
up?
think that, what they say, the detail, the devil's in the details. I think you'll find as time goes on, you will begin to see the reality of it. But on the surface, it didn't look dramatic. But I think you'll find that, as time goes on, the reality will come. Look, first things first, they're going to say, are interest rates going to go down? Because that's what's going to motivate it. And the answer of that is probably no, in my
Not
opinion,
now.
right? Yeah, and I said that before the budget came. I said I can't see it, I don't understand it, but everybody was on the fact that it was. So I don't think that that's going to happen. Secondly, will there be more taxation? Yes, I think there will be. In the early part of next year, we will see some of those taxations. First-time buyers are suffering from stamp duty fatigue, and will that race continue? We don't know. So I think give it another month or two, and you'll start to see what the true colours of our new leaders is.
Well, we promised you a budget special this week, and that's hopefully what we've delivered for you. You're looking at the effects of this autumn budget from Rachel Reeves in the autumn statement as from a property perspective. So please join us again for another Property Matters very soon.